Have you ever noticed something strange about the problems we face? Not the monumental, life altering crises, but the tiny, insistent ones, the ones that crawl under your skin. You know the feeling, that persistent, low grade annoyance, the way a minor technical glitch can derail your entire morning, the one negative comment that overshadows 20 positive ones. It's an itch you can't quite scratch. There's something strange about this quiet internal battle. It feels modern, doesn't it? The stress of the digital age, the constant ping of obligation. But here's the paradox. Centuries ago, they lived with a problem far more literal, yet deeply, fundamentally similar. They dealt with the inescapable, relentless intrusion of body lice and fleas. How did they cope with that constant, humiliating invasion? How do you maintain your sense of self when you're literally being consumed by tiny, unseen enemies? And more importantly, what does their struggle tell us about our own private battle with the psychological fleas that cling to our peace of mind today? You imagine the medieval world, and you picture grand castles, stained glass, maybe a muddy village, but you overlook the most immediate reality of their existence, the constant physical discomfort. You are living in rough woolen clothes, rarely washed, your bedding is straw, your neighbors, human and animal, are in constant close contact. The invaders are always there. The flea is the jump scare of the medieval world, a sudden, sharp bite, a reminder that you are not in control of your own body. But the louse? That's the slow, insidious dread. The louse is the long-term chronic stressor. It clings to the very fabric of your life, to the threads of your shirt, to the hairs on your head. How do you react? You scratch. Instinctively, a primal impulse to remove the irritation. But here's the truth about scratching. It never actually solves the problem. It only offers a moment of intense focus, a brief, frantic sense of action that ultimately leaves the skin more inflamed, the problem more entrenched. But here's what's fascinating. They weren't always scratching in shame. They would often flee. You see them sitting together, mother and child, friends, lovers, patiently, meticulously, picking the invaders from each other's clothes and hair. It's an act of shared labor, a communal acknowledgement of a universal problem. There is no pretense, no hiding the issue. The infestation is simply part of the landscape. They don't see the louse as a personal moral failure, but as a condition of life. But here's the thing. You are not simply removing a pest. You are engaging in an intimate, focused act of care. And this is where it gets interesting. Think about your own psychological fleas. The ones you try to ignore, the ones you try to scratch away violently. Maybe it's the constant comparing of your life to others on social media. Maybe it's the toxic internal critic that whispers you're not good enough. You try to distract yourself. You try to numb the feeling. You try to convince yourself the itch isn't there. But the persistent irritation, the sense of being bitten by worry or obligation remains. This connects directly to concepts in attachment theory. When you were a child, a caregiver didn't just meet your monumental needs, food, shelter. They met the tiny ones too. They soothed the small scrape, they rubbed the sore spot, they checked for the little bug bite. When you flee for someone, you are saying, I see your small constant pain, and I will sit with you in its tedious reality. You are co-regulating their nervous system. That patient, physical act of searching and removing signals safety, it says, you are not alone in your discomfort. But what happens when you're dealing with your own internal fleas, the psychological ones? You often feel you must hide them. You believe that admitting to this persistent, petty irritation, a feeling of being overwhelmed by emails, a relentless sense of envy, is a sign of weakness. And this is where it gets complex. The avoidance of the small, irritating problem often makes the infestation worse. The medieval person, in their pragmatic simplicity, understood a key truth. Pests are a given. The goal isn't elimination, the goal is management. They knew that complete, sterile perfection was an impossible fantasy. But you, living in a world obsessed with hygiene and control, often feel that any sign of infestation, any mistake, any lingering anxiety, any imperfection, must be immediately and violently eradicated. This frantic, perfectionistic scratching is often just a form of emotional self-sabotage. You become vigilant, hyper-aware. Every flicker of anxiety feels like a new bite. Every minor setback confirms the infestation of your life is worse than everyone else's. Here's what's really happening. You are treating the symptom, the scratch, not the cause. You're using your mental energy to fight the feeling instead of acknowledging its source. This creates a state of chronic psychological inflammation. This is the psychological consequence of trying to be clean in an inherently dirty world. You build a fortress of control, but the small, persistent irritations, the metaphorical fleas, still find a way in. They always do. The medieval solution wasn't boiling your clothes every day. That was too much labor, too much time. It was the fine-tooth comb. The fine-tooth comb is a metaphor for mindfulness. It's an acknowledgement that you have to slow down. You have to move with intention, not frantic panic. You have to accept the tedium of the process. You can't just slap at the air. You have to patiently, systematically run the comb through the strands of your life, examining each one. The comb forces you to look closely at the things you want to ignore. The louse is easy to spot against the backdrop of the comb. The problem, when isolated and held in the light, often loses its terror. But the truth is, the fine-tooth comb doesn't just remove the pests. It also forces you into a moment of quiet, focused presence. You are entirely absorbed in the small, manageable task. You are not thinking about the mortgage or the future. You are thinking about the single louse in front of you. This is a form of cognitive reframing. You take the overwhelming, pervasive anxiety, the infestation, and break it down into tiny, manageable units, the individual louse. The old wisdom is this: you don't have to solve everything, but you can deal with the single, present irritation. And maybe that's the real psychological insight we take from their persistent discomfort. The only way to deal with the constant, small irritations of life is not to rage against them, but to gently, consistently attend to them. To stop seeing the louse as a catastrophe and start seeing it as a task. So, you see, the medieval person sitting patiently, pulling a tiny creature from a thread of fabric offers you a powerful lesson. They weren't emotionally detached. They were simply pragmatically accepting of life's inherent discomforts. They didn't waste energy on self-judgment. Their shame was minimal because the problem was universal. And that is your validation. If you feel overwhelmed by the persistent small irritations, the comparison, the inner critic, the impossible standards, you are not weak. You are simply dealing with your own version of the fleas and lice that have clung to the human experience for millennia. Your self-compassion is your fine-tooth comb. It allows you to slow down, to see the specific, isolated irritation without generalizing it into a catastrophic failure of your entire being. Don't scratch frantically, sit down, accept the tedium, run the comb slowly, and remember the quiet solidarity of all those who have ever had to stop their busy lives to address the persistent, unavoidable itch. The truest sense of control doesn't come from eliminating every pest from your life. It comes from accepting that the pests will come and knowing with quiet confidence that you always have a comb. Your peace is not the absence of irritations. It is the gentle, consistent commitment to clearing them away.